Exciting news for the Ford. Finally going to make some movement on it. We now have some cool parts that just showed up. So I'm backed up over here. Let's show our pile of parts. So we have an entire load of front end suspension and brake components for the Ford F100. So I guess I will show the process of putting all this in its frame. So good little truckload, pretty little penny. So that is all of that. The frame is out here. It's a little dark out, just got home from work. Hey girl. You're still looking pretty with your new paint. I think the motors, I'm working on a surprise for your motor, so hopefully that comes through. But this been steam cleaned and washed, but this whole front end's going to get cut apart and taken off. So we'll show that process when we get her in the shop. Maybe this next weekend. It might be a few weeks. We're still working on that Coronet. The 68 Coronet, we're getting it all prepped up and close for paint. So hopefully she'll be painted and looking pretty. You're looking gorgeous though. Oh, I can't even get you good camera angle, good light, nothing? Ah, well. It was fun taking this to work today. It always gets lots of attention when I drive it. She's a little bit of a beast. My driver's door's open, but all right. These are the parts. We'll go through them and show them a little bit later. So I've gone through and looked at all our fun stuff of this Mustang 2 kit. I've never done one quite like these. These are definitely a weld together, cut in fit, unlike some other kits that are kind of specifically made for the frame. We've got the Ford F100 frame up here. All this has to go. So you gotta love some factory welds and stuff you got going on in here. But I was going to strip it all apart on the frame, leave it on my lift so I could put it up in the air and park underneath on it. But I also don't want to park up the lift. I think this is going to take a lot longer than a weekend project just to do that front end. So I'm going to lower it back down, put it on some dollies, move it, and kind of put it in between the two bays so I still have a place to park, and I can send work on it. I want to put it on some jack stands, get the ride height and level, and get the frame to the exact point of where I want it over here fixed on the concrete. That way my ride height and stuff doesn't change while I'm working on it, so that I can make sure that it's right. The beautiful paint job that was done last weekend, she still looks amazing, and that was last weekend. So we also don't want grinding and cutting on this to affect that. I'll probably close the curtain down. The owner's coming to pick this up. He wants to put the door latches and things in it and kind of secure it up a little bit more and get that going. Something I really didn't show on my last video of the paint, you know, the single stage to two stage on the jams. It's came out absolutely beautiful. It's a shadow right there, so that's a shadow line. That's actually, it is the same color, but you can see where the light's coming through. Same thing with the trunk. Stripes come out nice. Boy, that trunk is heavy without its hinges. But little water spots under there from when we wet sanded. The rear valence came out smooth and nice through there. She's got some nice hips, I'll tell you that much. But anyways, we're gonna lower this down. We'll throw it on some dollies. I'm gonna clean up some garbage over here, move this over, set it up over here, put it up on jack stands, and then take the plasma cutter and stuff, and I'll start cutting this apart. I'll show couple steps of it. It's going to be a long process. It's not going to be easy. There's stuff where this cup is completely welded in, and then there's other spots that it's got bolting stuff down. The engine mounts are bolted to the frame, so those can get unbolted. But then this is a cab mount, so the cab mount has to stay exactly where it's at for the cab. This cross member piece here, you know, there's a bolt here, but it's riveted here, and it's riveted up under here, under that. I think I might leave this here, one for stability and to hold the frame together. I'm probably going to take a piece of metal and run a piece of metal across here and bolt something to this just to keep the front end of the frame braced up, or throw a piece of metal up there and tack weld it real quick. But we got to get moving on this Ford. Let's get some process on. I want the front end done, get the suspension done. I want to get the cab put back on the frame so I can kind of get that squared up, start doing body work on the cab, on the frame, and then take it on and off, make sure everything's fitting well. Because we also have to make custom engine mounts and the whole core support and everything for the new engine, and get all that stuffed in. Let's pick all this up. So this is where the frame's going to sit for a while. Before we cut all this apart, we need to find our center point, because this vehicle actually did sit, the wheel set very nice in the archway. Plus, when I got this vehicle, it's already somewhat tore apart. So I don't have, unless I put the entire cab and frame and core on it, to center the wheel. So we're going to go off a center of what this wheel was. And once this is all cut, you know, you can scribe a line on your frame, and you want to drive a line across and then have a scribe mark on this top edge, which I'm going to do that also. But for some other measurements, something that's not going to change, I'm going to take this bolt on the front of the spring perch, and I'm going to clip it right hard on that bolt, which I did a minute ago with two hands, kind of hard with the camera. Come on. All right, as we're stripping, thought this was kind of funny. Front shocks, Motorcraft. I highly doubt those are factory, but they've been way rustier. This truck was surprisingly in great condition. But we'll get the springs off. That front end's about ready to drop. I gotta be honest, not easy. Grind, cut, beat on it. Sledgehammer is definitely handy. So cups are off, or the spring perches are off. I can't even get to the back of this bolt, or the nut. Maybe I can from the bottom across, but got to get those off and then cut that center section out. All right, so trying to reverse what engineers did in 1966. So there's a small frame right here that is welded to the main part of the frame, and so you can't get to cut the welds off. So I got like this side cut off, but that inner part of the frame that's right here is actually put on the frame first, welded in there and on the back side. So that has to get all cut off before I can get it off. That's why I thought by cutting this and across this would come loose, but I am mistaken. I have to cut across that bottom section also. Yippee skippy. I am the winner. God damn. All right. Now I'm going to cut more of that back. I'm going to come over here. I need to trim more back in here. Cut this out, clean this square up there just so I can make that flat. Then I need to box in this frame, and I'm going to box in from pretty much the cab mount forward so I make a good solid frame in here. And I'll box all that up before we start putting in the K-member, or not K-member, Chrysler would be a K-member, the cross member and all that fun stuff. All right, so we have the frame stripped, cleaned, boxed in. The center line is the center line of the axle. These directions are far from straightforward. They're very universal for putting this kit on tons and tons of things. So I need to take my time, figure out a lot of stuff. You know, this has to get notched and fitted to weld. You got to figure out your ride height. I basically have the frame sitting level, sitting pretty low for what this truck would have been. I don't know how low or what he's going to want to do for a final ride height, but that's how far we got. It took way longer than I would have ever thought to cut that front end off and just get it boxed in, but it took a while, and welds aren't perfect, but they're penetrated and clean. It's fine for a frame. I'll still sand it down. We're going to sandblast this whole frame down and paint everything and get it looking nice after the front is tacked on and welded in that way. So that's where we're at. So we found our center line. I've held this up into place, making measurements. You have to know the center of your ride height and your axle. So I've taken a straight edge, drawn a line straight off of the frame on both sides. So now I'm going to notch that down 1.5 inches and set that up into the frame 1.5 inches and kind of base that on my ride height. The frame is sitting a little high for where it's probably going to end being, but for a truck it's fairly low for right now. I'll get those out and notched out and then set up into place. So all I have is the cross member lightly tacked in, and then this upper mount you're supposed to mount up on top of the frame and then notch it down where it needs to be and cut it in. The problem that I'm running into is basically where this needs to go. I'm either going to need to notch my frame or just barely get it to, you know, it's going to be touching there. Basically, to have any kind of suspension travel to it, it needs to be out there. But then that puts this in a downward angle and pushes it down. If I notch this more and bring this up more, then this frame is going to be sitting even lower to the ground. And we are trying to build a, you know, a two-wheel drive street truck, but I don't want some slammed, you know, this is still Montana. You still have to go up and down curbs and driveway entrances, things that way. So I have a friend who custom builds front suspensions and makes his own A-arms and builds everything. He said he might come out tomorrow and give me some pointers. I'm probably overlooking something, but that's about as far as I think I'm going to get today, because I just don't feel comfortable moving forward, because I need this thing to drive nice when it's all said and done. I'm using the good old Jeep as my workbench. That's the kit. So going through everything, you know, frame is level. Yeah, there's that. Good old Sweppy charger. She got a leak in her radiator, so we also pulled its radiator. Gotta love the hood angle. You can actually work on it. But back to the suspension. I'll make some decisions, figure out what I want to do. So this front end has definitely taken some work. I'm still in mock-up stages. I only have the frame tack welded in for ride height, the cross member. I've had to cut that down and went another inch up, which makes this sit another inch lower than I really think we want. We're trying not to make a too low of a street ride, but we can still go with changing our spindles to get our height back up. To get our upper bucket to fit for our proper height here, we've had to notch this out to set that into the height. And then this has to be on the front side, like it's like 9 1/4 high over here and like 8 3/8 over here, so that this is tipped back, so that gives you adjustment, and we're adjusting for camber and that type of thing off of that. And then we're going to put this gauge ends up going between our spindle butt nuts here, and we're looking for 5 degrees angled towards the back. So when you slam on your brakes and this goes down, if it's angled to the back as you apply brake, then that tire goes up this way. If it's more level and you apply your brake, go this way, the whole vehicle nosedives. And so to keep your front end from diving, these are the reasons we add those pitches in now. But we've had to cut that much of the frame out to adjust for this suspension, because basically this Mustang 2 is a car suspension going onto a truck frame. These kits are designed for a 4-inch frame, which these are 6-inch frames. So even if I was to raise this way up, and if I would have raised it even a little bit more, I'm almost out of the height for my rack and pinion in here. So I still have to have my rack and pinion adjustment for the steering. So you have to have this gap in the frame here, or you end up having to notch your frame other positions. So this weld-in kit that's designed for this truck is not designed for this truck. It's a very universal kit. It takes a lot of engineering. It takes a lot of measuring. So I've got to still make a few more measurements, a few more tacks. I'm just tack welding. Everything looks really hideous right now. I'm grinding and tacking and just kind of sort of fitting together, so that I can knock it all apart, weld it in heavy. I'm going to make gusset supports and grind those edges down and make those clean. We'll finish boxing that in, I'm probably going to add more support, because if you really think about it, the entire weight of the car is all on this. The spring goes up into this, so when you go into a corner, this has to be Rocco Solido, because as that goes up and down, the springs and everything ride on that upper bucket. So that upper bucket holds all the weight. If you're turning a corner and hitting your brakes and all that weight load loads up front onto your left front corner as you're turning left, 90% of the weight of your car is right there. So clean welds, clean grinds. I got to grind this a lot more. I got to clean it a lot more. I'm just still kind of in the mock-up stage, but that is where I got tonight. A few hours after work. Here we are tacked in. So take our gauge. If we put our gauge on the spindle, we are level up and down that way. If we go to these back bolts on the back side, we are 5 degrees pitched back, so that direction. So that makes this like this. Then this top plate, we are 9 1/4 inches from the top of this plate to the center of this bolt, and we are 8 7/8 inches from the center of this bolt to the top of this plate, which makes that plate angle also. So there's that angle there, and then there's the angle on the spindle, so that we have proper dive that direction. And then this is all set in the middle of these bolts. We still have all the adjustment there. The system goes up and down with no binding. Everything's moving that way. Our little cups need to be popped back in, but all that has to be taken apart so it can be welded. But right now, there's one little tack in every little corner. So I will have to do the same thing to the other side. And once we check that, then what I'm going to do is pull some measurements from the back of the frame to like the top of this grease zerk, and the same over there to make sure, you know, we are exactly right to exactly right. And that should be dunsies once it's all welded up. I probably have a full day of welding and grinding and cleaning it up before it can be sandblasted and sent off to get blasted. Then I'll bring it back to paint it. But I'm going to go home or go inside for the night. I'm not even going to clean up my mess. I am a little upset these little bolts that go in here. They're kind of a fancy little bolt that goes through that little notch, and when you tighten them up, they turn and they lock into place. They come with these little set nuts. The nuts completely stripped the bolt. I couldn't get them off. Ended up having to use the big gun to break the bolts. One stripped out that way. The other bolt broke completely in half, and it's laying around here somewhere. But there's the other nut. The nuts went in. I went to take it off, and I could not get them off. So I went and got just normal nuts for that. But then I have to do something different when I do the others, because you really can't get, well, I guess you could get a bolt up through there if you had to, but that's the nice part of those little set nuts for the adjustments and sliding and everything that way. All right, on to the next side. It's all rough welded in. I'm going to spend some time on a grinder and clean it up and re-welds, but this cross member here needs to come out. Can't affect the cab mount, so this stays here. These rear bars for the original suspension, they're held in with these lovely rivets, and this is a cast iron piece, so it'll be fun cutting those out and getting that off. But that is what I'm going to work on next. So I just jacked it up so I can get up under there, work on that, so I can finish grinding, cleaning that. And then I'll pick up some mess and keep grinding, keep welding. Well, I will say these rivets put up a fight. So when you're trying to get those off, rivets are actually tapered when they're put in, so you can only drive them out the one direction. And the cross member into here, these rivets had to go this way, the top rivets had to go that way. It's amazing how much work it is to grind and cut off that cross member and get it cleaned out. But it is now gone, so once we have engine mounts and things that way, we'll have that for the cabin frame. I am going to sandblast and paint the frame before engine mounts so that I can get the cab on, and then I'll just grind the areas that I'm going to put the engine mounts and all that, and just touch it up with some paint after the fact. But basically, it's cleaned up enough to get it to the sandblaster. So I'm going to throw it on my trailer, take it into town. I'll run it over to my shop, have one of my guys sandblast it, and bring it back, throw some epoxy primer on it, throw a coat of chassis black on it, and that'll be where it will be until we get the cab on. So that's about as far as I'm going to get with it today. That is the front end of putting a Mustang 2 kit on a 66 frame. It's a little upsetting I had to notch the frame that far. The crazy part is this thing's still going to sit crazy low. The customer doesn't want it to sit low. that's as low as I can put this mount to get it to the frame for ride height. It's going to be sitting pretty low. We're going to have a lot of modifications to the rear end I need to do, and or I'm going to have to go with 2-inch taller spindles than the 2-inch drop spindles I have. But we'll get it cleaned up, painted, get the cab on it, and then start moving forward on some fitment and motor issues and all that. I think that's as far as we're going to go tonight. I'm going to clean up my mess. I'll keep a little bit of vice grip on the tube. And that is the Ford frame as far as I got on that. Hope you didn't get too bored. It's a little long for just cutting and welding and sticking a couple pieces of metal together, but it was ridiculously hard.